I think it would be, if it isn't well attended, I feel like the traction on it would be good to do it again in another format, because it's all the stuff you're talking about. I'm very curious to see what how the presentations are received in the questions and stuff like that. Hopefully the participants will actually have questions. Are you, Sahi, are you going to have a webinar on like other aspects of practice? Is this transition to practice, the whole series?
No, I mean, the goal is to have a webinar for therapists, a webinar for APPs, and then whatever else we can think of. Yeah.
Sorry to
Brilliant.
interrupt, but it is officially 8, and I want to start letting people in if we all want to get ready.
Let's do
Sounds
it.
good.
So we can go ahead and darken our.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our brand new AHS, American Association for Hand Surgery, webinar series. This is our practice series, and we have our series lead, Dr. Sahi Dendaluri from Loyola University, who will go ahead and begin. So welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, everyone. We're happy to have you join us. We're thrilled to launch this series on practice. Today's focus will be on resident and fellows and getting into practice and ways to look for a job and how to manage your finances when you first start. I'm going to turn it over to our excellent moderator, Dr. Sonia Agnew, my wonderful partner and chief of our hand service here at Loyola. Dr. Agnew, please take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Dendaluri. I'm so honored to be part of this. As you can see, I'm at the Loyola University in Maywood, Chicago. And tonight we're joined by some amazing speakers. So we're going to start with Rob Kamal from Stanford, who's going to be talking about how to find an academic job in hand surgery. Next, from Indie Hand and Shoulders, Nick Crosby, he'll be talking about how to find a private practice job. Nina Sue at Emory is going to be talking about setting yourself up in your early practice. And then the cleanup is going to be Cal Shaw, who's at Scripps, and he's going to be talking about your personal finances in your early career. So great topics to discuss. I encourage you all to put questions in the chat box. We will plan on addressing those towards the end, unless there's some that are kind of folding in naturally. And so please feel free you can either send them directly to me in the chat or to everyone. It's up to you, but I'll keep an eye on the chat box as we go. And I think we'll have Dr. Kamal from Stanford start us off here. If you can share your slides.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Sonia and Sahi, for having me. So I get to talk about how to find an academic hand position. Just to give some quick background on agenda. So I'll talk mostly about what matters to you when job hunting. So I'll give you some examples of things that I looked at, but ultimately when you're looking for a job, especially in academics, a lot of it comes down to what it is that you're passionate about, what the features of a job are that are most important to you. We'll talk about how to look for that job and then how to set yourself up for success. So my path started in Missouri, just so you get a sense of geographically where I've been. So I started in Missouri and moved to New England and then moved to North Carolina and then ended up in California. And so I've been sort of everywhere, and you can see geography perhaps isn't something that is super important for me in terms of when I was looking for positions. I would categorize the first thing to consider when you look for academic practice as the 3 Ps. So those are purpose, priorities, and partners. And so the first is in academics, generally speaking, you have to have some purpose by which drives you to be an academic hand surgeon. And for some, that's a deep expertise in certain procedures or certain conditions. For others, that's research, and for others, that's education. But whatever it may be, understanding what that purpose is for you can help guide the types of hand surgery positions you look at. And so an example is if you are, highly interested in being a clinician scientist, and you're going to look at certain job types that have that level of support, and that may be different if you're interested in other aspects of academics. The next is priorities, and that's sort of the theme that I'll say for all of the topics I bring up, which is for you, and what's most important for you when thinking about a job is going to be different than the person next to you or the person maybe interviewing for that job. So I would say the most important thing is understanding what your priorities are. An example is geography for me was not that important, which is why I sort of moved around all over the place and sort of found what made the best fit for me for other things that were important. So just understanding what it is that you value and starting with that at the beginning is important so that it guides sort of what types of positions you look at. And the last thing I'll mention is partners. I think partners is critical. It's tough because oftentimes we don't know our partners and we don't know what they're like. But in my opinion, partners can make or break a job, especially in academics where it's very much a team sport, and a lot of what you do, a lot of the focus of the division you might be working on is trickles down from your partners and the culture that your partners set. And so trying to do the best job you can, talking to people that have been to that institution, have worked there, trained there, etc., is, I think, one of the most important things to do, so you get a sense of the culture and the way in which the partners treat each other and treat sort of a new junior faculty. So what are hard and soft features of a job for you? So for me, like I mentioned, location, I love where I live now location-wise. It is one of the most expensive places to live, but it wasn't necessarily a driver of the type of job that I looked at, but that may be different for others. So some other examples of features to consider are location, and others are practice type, and I think we're going to hear about a different types of practice models from different speakers today. So there are, sort of academic jobs, there's private jobs, there's private jobs, just understanding the practice types that align with the things that sort of excite you when you wake up on Monday and are going to go to work for the week. And then the last is understanding the business model. And so even within academics, you'll find there are different business models, and understanding the way in which those work is really important for ultimately making sure that you have the right revenue to support, what it is that you're interested in, your family, and other things that you want to do, hobbies. So business models can vary from being RVU based, from being collections based, and those, have different factors that influence them. So an example is when you're RVU based as a business model, then your payer mix doesn't matter at all, and it's you just do what you do, and you don't really pay attention to payer mix at all. If you're collections based, then payer mix makes a difference, and it may not make a difference in terms of what you do as a surgeon, but it may make a difference in what the trajectory of your market is, and understanding what's happening in terms of how the market is changing for different types of payers, and why it is that that academic center is hiring someone, and all those things make a difference in terms of whether you take that job or not. So it's worth sort of figuring out and asking when you're interviewing and looking at the position. In academic hand surgery positions, there's obviously other aspects beyond just practice. So one of them is education and understanding your interaction with trainees, and what it will be when you start and what it would grow to in the future is important, especially if that's the reason that you're interested in academic hand surgery. So getting a sense of what that's like, and talking to residents and fellows at the place you're interviewing can be helpful in terms of understanding the culture of the site. The curriculum and how involved you can be in the curriculum is worth asking about. What the facilities are in which the trainees are working and where you're interacting with them. And again, like I mentioned, culture is important. Research, when we look at research positions, the things I talk to people about is understanding, one, the infrastructure within the department. So what are resources that are available to you at no cost? And so for some places that's an engineer to do biomechanical studies, other places it's a biostatistician to help with health services research, but understanding what resources are available and what you actually have access to is important. The second is understanding what resources are available outside of the department that you're looking at. And so you may find that there's a biostats department, for example, that has free resources for faculty to get guidance on projects and things like that. So asking about that is important to get a sense of what comes to you for free and then what comes to you that you have to ask for. And so the next is sort of what is your ask for package and things like that. When I talk to graduates of our program, we usually go through sort of asking for a research package, but having a justification for why it is you need that package. So what it is you're going to do with a resource or an FTE that you would like to hire half-time, and what your plans are for grant submissions and things like that. So it goes past just asking for resources, but what it is you'll do with those resources to justify getting the package. And so just something to think about as you start looking at different positions. Other features of jobs and contracts that are important, and certainly are important for your quality of life and how much you enjoy your job. So taking call and what call looks like and who call is with and what the culture of call is in terms of is call a team sport where you sort of hand off to partners, and partners are willing and interested in taking cases if they're going to be, let's say, at the main hospital and something can wait till the next day. Is there a team that helps you with it, or do you do that in the middle of the night, or do you do it the next day? So understanding what that's like and the details of that can be helpful. Practice factors like locations, partners, etc. So are you starting at a satellite and generating a new practice and building a practice up, or are you taking over someone's practice? And when you're starting in a new site and you're generating sort of practice, what's the infrastructure for you to meet with primary care docs and other stakeholders to get referrals and things like that? And then that gets to your salary in terms of how is your salary backstopped as you're growing that new practice at that new location. So just one example of something to consider. Involvement on the business side, so that's variable in terms of how transparent the P&L is for a department, and so it's worth asking. It's probably not something you can influence, but it's certainly something you might find out in terms of, do you get to see your revenue, and then do you get to see sort of what the various taxes are before it gets to you, or is that kept in sort of the hands of leadership? Ancillaries and what your access to ancillaries is important. So do you have hand therapy? Do you have access to CT, MRI, things like that? And how quickly can patients get those when you need them is worth asking about. Leadership opportunities within the department, if that's an interest of yours in terms of understanding the timeline and the support system for senior faculty to elevate junior faculty into positions, is important if that's important to you. And so it's worth asking when you're interviewing. And then my only bit on operating rooms is to ask for everything. So typically after you've started and you want something new, you have to go through the VBS or some sort of committee, whereas when you're starting, it's oftentimes a little easier to say, these are the 15 things I need to have in my set when I operate, because I always use them for X, Y, and Z cases. It's a little bit of an easier conversation. So just think about that when you are signing. So how to look for a job. There's structured ways to look for a job. Here's the Hand Association's job board. Other organizations have job boards. So it's always worth looking at these, and it's worth looking at these early, because you never know when something will pop up, and you never know when there's a need that will pop up. So it's worth looking 2 years before. So I started looking as a chief resident just to see what was available. Unstructured job hunting is just as important, which is talking to your mentors and having your mentors reach out. If there's geographic areas you're interested in, having your mentors reach out to their connections in those areas or certain institutions. Cold emails to leadership often are effective, and as you talk, you'll hear that there's plenty of people that got an interview for a position just because they sent a cold email with their CV and showed interest and things aligned. And then there's also recruiters that are available as well. I'll quickly just run through some red flags, and this list could probably go on and on, but things that I see happen that you should just sort of stop and take pause and maybe ask more questions when these happen. So the first is lack of engagement of faculty. So if you're interviewing and you don't get to meet all your potential partners or are told not to talk to potential partners that you might work with, I would ask more questions about that and just get a sense of what the barriers to that are. Getting a sense of your work environment and talking to admin, staff, research staff, things like that will give you some sense of culture in terms of how people are treated. Seeing the facilities where you'll work for some people is important. I think you want to make sure that you're allowed to see those if you're looking at a job. Roles and responsibilities in terms of what you're in charge of and how your performance is assessed is important to ask about and get some considerations on in terms of, when you sign on, there are other things that you're going to be taking on when you're starting your practice and learning and, getting advice for cases. Are there other things that are going to fall on your lap as well? Culture I mentioned before in terms of turnover and stable leadership. And lastly, just market in terms of how the system is performing financially and how much of that data they share. So set yourself up for success. So preparing for your job search, define what matters to you. So think of it like a Maslow's hierarchy and start thinking of what is sort of critical and necessary and what is sort of a nice to have versus a have to have. Prepare your pitch for talking to people, networking at meetings, and seeing if jobs are available. Know what your value adds are in terms of what is unique about your background experiences. Get your CV reviewed and just stay organized. And then lastly, talk to people that have been bosses and talk to your friends and mentors that have hired themselves to get a sense of what they know about places and what the places might be looking for, what the culture is, and how that might sort of help organize how you start searching for your job. And so some of my mentors, but sort of look to them and ask them how it is they were bosses. So thanks again for having me and look forward to the discussion.
That was awesome. I was taking notes and I have a feeling that some of the folks in the audience have some questions for you. One thing as Dr. Crosby is getting his slides loaded up, question about promotion. So promotion as it relates to salary, which is a kind of an issue in academic institutions that's maybe not so in private practice. Do you run into that as like a big difference in different parts of the country? Have you noticed that there's a big difference as far as the promotion criteria and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've seen both extremes, one of which you don't really know and they give you some general guidance, and the other where they list the number of papers you need to publish and certain criteria. So it's actually worth asking, and I'm glad someone brought that up, but it's worth asking to get a sense of what it is your performance is being measured by. And in some systems, the promotion is tied to some bump in a bonus or some salary, and others not. So again, worth asking. Great question.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So Dr. Crosby, why don't you take it away? We're going to do the mirror image, how to find private practice hand position. Just in case. Are you muted?
I am, but now I'm not.
Okay.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to thank Sonia and Sahi for letting me share some thoughts here. And interestingly, you could have almost copied Rob's talk and flipped it to mine, but just changed private and academic practices. And you're going to see a lot of similarities. What I've tried to do, there will be some generalities in here that you'll see that are very similar to what he shared. Then I put some specific pearls or tips in there. I call them pro tips. And so if you see a slide with just that, if you're looking to kind of take note of anything in particular, if you are looking at private practice. I myself have been in private practice my whole life, so I'm fairly well, not my whole life, my whole career, I've been fairly well suited for this. After I finished my fellowship here at Indiana, I stayed on as faculty, and I'll get to a slide in a minute, but that was not my intention. I had no plan to stay here. But as I evaluated where I wanted to be in life and what I want to do, this turned out to be a great opportunity. And so I've been in private practice the whole time. Interestingly, our group, after 50 years of subspecialty practice as a hand-only surgery practice, we merged with a multi-specialty group a couple of weeks ago. So that's very new for us. But again, it's in private practice, which is something that's passionate and important to me and my partners. So Without further ado, I'll get into this. So first of all, just a little bit about the concept of private practice and some reasons to do it. And this certainly, I'm not going to do a separate slide on the reasons for academic, but maybe a little bit on why not to do private practice. But again, you're going to see similarities between what Rob and I talk about. And so it really comes down to you and what you're looking for and what really gets you excited to do your job. Certainly physician autonomy is something that's talked a lot about in private practice. Now you can have that in any job, but as you are your own boss, depending on how big or small organization you're part of, you really can control what you do. You have an opportunity to work in small business. Some physicians and people out there want to dabble in different things and they want to be involved in running a business. And that's not something I was actually looking for. Specifically, it's something I do a lot of. I'm in business meetings a lot. I probably spend between 5 and 10 hours a week extra running our business and helping my partners run our business, which is something that's been new, enjoyable for me, but not something I anticipated coming in. You can personalize patient care maybe a little bit differently. If you want to do it a certain way, you can do it a certain way, and there's no one to tell you can't. Certainly, there's a potential for higher compensation. Again, that usually comes at a cost of having to do this work. You can serve the underserved maybe in a different way. Now, this one I think is variable. As we'll talk in a minute, cost of care is becoming difficult. So sometimes it's actually easy to serve underserved in a more academic setting where a large organization is backing you. But at least that's something to consider because you can do what you want. You have flexibility, control, and then again, diversity of work. You can be involved in marketing, you can be involved in the business, you can be involved in finance, plus your job as a hand surgeon. If that's something that is exciting, then it may be something to consider. Now, on the opposite is, sorry, a little quote here. Historically, professional satisfaction is linked to autonomy and the ability to lead change. It will be interesting to see how people react to this loss of autonomy when larger businesses take over. The challenge of private practice, increasing costs and decreasing reimbursements. We see this all over. All of medicine is seeing this problem, but when you're at a large university or a large hospital where you're employed, someone else is absorbing that trouble. Now, it will trickle down, I'm sure, but in my world, where there are 12 of us in a partnership and now about 60 of us, every little bit matters. Also, this consolidation of medical care, where you're getting more vertical alignment within health systems, consolidation of different practices. You got to be aware of being left out and not having a great payer mix, not having good connections with insurance. And then finally, the extra work may not be exciting. You may want to focus on just your job, where maybe an employed job is more, or you may want to focus more on academics and work, where an academic position may be more appropriate. Keeping in mind, in my practice, we were what you might call a private-emic practice, where we have our private practice, but we've also been involved in fellowship and residence education for 40-something years. So we have a pretty big fellowship, which is what draws us all here. So here's a pro tip, and this is not contrary to what's been what Rob said and what was posted, but this is really important. Don't rush your decision. I completely agree. Start looking early. Start getting a feel for early. Go ahead and do interviews early. But we tell our fellows all the time, you don't even know what it means to be a hand surgeon. When you come out of residency, you're an orthopedic surgeon. And then you get into your fellowship and you finally learn what it is to be a hand surgeon and what kind of a hand surgeon you want to be. So most jobs, I can't say this for everything, but most jobs will wait for you if they like you and it's right for you. So don't rush. And we often will encourage our fellows, don't make a decision before you're at least a few months into fellowship. So one of the pro tips I have for you, just be patient before you make your decision. Next, and this has been already said, you got to know your priorities. So is it practice location, practice type, is location, how much call is, what compensation is like, what your future growth will be. I'll tell you, for me personally, I started out with the location concern. I promised my wife that we would go someplace where she had family. So that was 3 states we were looking at. And I beat down every possible door in those states trying to look for a job that was exciting. And after I went through a series of interviews, I was not too excited. She, of course, recognized that. And we took a step back and said, what really matters? And I wanted a job where I could have a big diversity of practice. I want to be able to train and teach fellows or residents. I want to be able to control my own future. And lo and behold, that was right here in Indianapolis where I was training. Fortunately, they had a position they were looking at and had talked about me, and I was able to join the group here, but it fit perfectly. But you can see next to that priority is be willing to change, but don't ignore them. Know what your priorities are, really stick to them, but then also kind of reevaluate as you're going along and make sure you're doing what you think is right. Okay. Practice type, you're going to go in a generalist, you're going to be hand only, the different types, the different sizes and location, talk to everyone in town, talk to the competition. I'll talk about that in a minute. So here's the other priority, pro tip is priorities. Feel free to change, but be sure you're kind of keeping those in mind the entire time. This is advice I got from one of my attendings in residency. At the time, it did not make sense. Rob already talked about it, but one of the most important things you can do is to choose good partners. And this is hard to know going in. But one thing you want to look at and try to get a feel for is the culture of the practice. What is their quality of care and how much they focus on that, or is it more just a throughput type of a practice? Are there historical trends? Is there a reputation? Is there some type of excellence that you're wanting to get involved in? Is there hierarchy? Well, I can tell you there is hierarchy. Wherever you go, there's some level of who's in charge or who gets preference. But, is that really structured? Is that okay if it's structured? And how is that handled? What about leadership? Who leads it? Is it a single person? Is it a group? In our group, we've had an executive board for years. And so there are several of us that kind of lead the charge there, and that changes from year to year. And then as far as your partners go, is it practice partners, business partners, management, or ownership? So if you are in a hospital employed place, which is not the focus of my talk, your partners may be business people who are helping you or telling you or whatever how to do things. In my case, I get to sit around the table with my partners, and we don't always get along. There are some times where we get mad at each other, but we can at least sit around the table and talk to each other and say, this is what's important, this is what we want to do, and this is how we're going to go about it. Honesty and transparency, I think, is huge. And you can get a sense of that through the whole process. It's about, and it may be talking to people who are partners there, people who are former partners, trying to talk to others in the community. One thing, I was talking to one of my fellows today, and he said, it's really interesting. There are a lot of jobs who wouldn't let you see anything as far as like their finances or any of their investments. And others are like, hey, we'll give it to you. We may, scribble out someone's name, but we'll show you everything that's out there. And I think that goes a long way. So definitely look for a place that's very transparent. And then next, you want to look at what your partnership track is like. When can you become a partner, and what does that mean to be a partner? Another pro tip, I mentioned this already, talk to others in town, including the competition for the job you're looking for, and talk to former partners. Now, if you say, I really have to be in this location, most of the time these jobs, or many times these jobs aren't posted. And if you just wait for a job to be posted, you may not ever get a good one. A lot of times the good ones are, word of mouth or something else. So don't be afraid to cold call a practice. Don't, if you're interviewing at this practice, but you're interested in the other practice, call the other practice. Let them know you're interviewing at the other place, but you're coming to town and you really want to get to know what's going on. Now, I have the little salt shaker there. You have to take it with a grain of salt. If you're talking to a former partner who left disgruntled, you got to understand that and understand, what they're saying may be flavored differently than the truth. The same goes with competition, but it certainly can give you a feel. I would think that people in our town would have certain things to say about us, and some of them are probably favorable and some maybe not, but I think there's going to be a lot of consistency about what people might say about our practice. Next would be income and expense model. So this was touched on before, but how do you get paid for your work? Is it based on the number of work units that you do, or is it collection based? Certainly salary is something that happens in private practice early on. Most private practice will bring you on with a salary, and you want to find out how long does that salary go. If you beat the salary, if you produce more than the salary, is there some kind of a bonus structure to that? Very, very few private practices continue salary. They usually have a period. I know in our group, until our recent merger, our salary is actually very low, and we wanted to encourage our new partners to build up their practice quickly. So the sooner they could get off salary and start making their own money, that was incentivizing them to build up their practice. There are some downsides that it may add extra stress early on in practice. So you have to think about that and what you really want to do. Other places say, hey, you have a salary for 2 years until you become partner, if you become partner. Also something to consider in a private practice model is overhead. Is this a shared equally overhead, or is it variable? And the variable means if you produce more, you get charged more for overhead. The theory being that if you're doing more work, then you're costing more work. The schedulers are working more, the billers are working more. Everyone's having to work more to support you. Now, personally, in our area and in a lot of ones, that seems a little counterintuitive. You want partners who are working hard trying to build up the business. So we like to look for models that promote hard work. So sharing the overhead is one way to do that, where you don't necessarily penalize a person for working harder. They actually just get the same hit on overhead, but you want to take a look at that carefully. Another tip here, ask the group about difficulties with rising costs and if they've considered any practice changes in the future. So I think if you go to any private practice in the world right now, or in the next several years, and this may change in 5 or 10 years, but right now, every private practice is talking about this. Over the last 5 to 7 years, you've heard about groups selling out to private equity groups, merging, selling to hospitals, you name it. We're all struggling with the financial side of how to stay relevant. And it's not so bad that everyone should run away. Like I said, we just merged with another group because we found that was going to be our best option forward because we want to stay private. But if they're not talking about it and they say, oh, no, everything's great, we have no concerns, I'd be a little weary of it. If they say, well, we have concerns, but this is what we're doing to mitigate those risks, that seems very transparent. Again, something that's going to help you feel secure about that. Again, pathway to partnership. What does it include? When I'm a partner, does that mean I just own in this entity that may or may not have much value? Does it mean I get ownership in the building that we're in, or some other ancillary ownership? When can partnership be offered? I interviewed for one job, and I asked them that question. I said, we don't really know. We'll just kind of see how it goes. And that was a big red flag. I think anyone who has a history of bringing partners in should have a pretty clear pathway. They can tell you when it's going to be offered. They can tell you who chooses it. In our partnership, we have to have a 100% -1. So everyone except for one person has to agree, or we don't offer partnership. And then what is the cost of buying? This is something you should learn early, because you may need to be saving up your pennies or think about getting a loan to pay in for partnership. And depending, that it's usually you get what you pay for. So if your buy-in is really low, then the income extra or what the partnership is worth is probably low. If the buy-in is really high, then the ancillary income is probably going to be pretty high. And then I have here, don't ask this question. I would not recommend asking this, but you can find out in the contract, what happens if you want to end your partnership? How do you unwind this process? Certainly can have that involved. In the world of non-competes, that's changing and getting a little bit softer, but it's still going to be in play for quite some time. Another tip, network through residency and fellowship mentors. I know in a number of cases, every year, we have 6 fellows every year. I know at least one of them is on the webinar tonight, but at least every year we have someone of our former fellows calling us saying, hey, if you have anyone who's interested in going to Chicago or Florida or California, let me know. We're looking for someone. And on the flip side, every year we have at least 1, if not 2 or 3 fellows saying, hey, do you know anyone in Boston or Oklahoma or wherever that did a fellowship here that I can talk to? So we use those networks a lot. Our fellows use those through us. So keep those in mind as you're going through the whole process. That can be very, very helpful. And coming to the end, ancillary income. Again, as finances are getting a little tighter, you always want to be thinking of this. Now, I think Rob mentioned access to ancillaries as far as what you can use. Here we're talking about owning the ancillaries, where you can make money off of that. And it's different in every practice. Is it part of the partnership, or is it separate? Does a whole group invest as one in these things, or can I go off and invest in my own separately? In my partnership currently, it's all the same. So if we decide we want to invest in a surgery center or a hospital or whatever, we do it as a group. A few years ago, one of the partners brought a plan to invest in an MRI company, and we all kind of looked at it and we're like, yeah, no, 1 or 2 want to do it, the rest of us didn't, so we didn't do it as a partnership. So you have to look at how those are handled. I know a lot of groups just say, hey, do your own thing. If you want to invest in that surgery center, go right ahead, but it's up to you. And then the types have their hospitals, HOPDs, ASCs, therapy, imaging, real estate. Those are all things. And then last but not least, when you're talking about ancillary income, is this Stark Law idea, these anti-kickbacks, where some things you can kind of refer to yourself, other things you can't. I'll tell you, it gets really convoluted and deep. So we always have lawyers involved in that. They're specialized in Stark Law, and they can help us understand exactly what we can own, what we can't own, how to set up the tax parameters of that, and to make sure we're doing everything above board on that. And that's all I have for you. So hopefully that answers some questions. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them.
That was awesome. Again, questions that I think come up a lot. How to get a job, when to look for a job. Sai, you pointed out, the earlier the better. I think going to meetings is a great way to network with your mentors, having them introduce you to to their colleagues and their friends in the different areas. So I thought that was an awesome talk. I really appreciate you. Dr. Sue, if you'd like to load up your slides, we can introduce you. So setting up early practice for success. And I wonder how much of your talk is going to be applicable to also mid-career type of folks. So I'll be paying attention. Thanks so much. And I'm going to go.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much to AAHS as well as to Sonia and Sahi for inviting me. This is a great talk. And I really think about it in terms of setting up your early career for success. And what you want to do is like, this is during your fellowship, your residency, your trainee. And so when you pivot to actually getting a real job after all this time, it's a little bit different. So there are certainly some considerations. So I have tried, I've tried to set this up to kind of help us decide about really getting to the sweet spot. Just because you start your practice in your first 5 years or something, that's not really it. Like you have a full career, and for your full career, you really want to start very, very strong and very positively. And really, I think the sweet spot is that you're able to kind of balance your personal life, your patient care, research, as well as education. And you're right in the center where you're happy and all wheels are turning at the same time. So as a disclaimer, I have always spent my time in academia. So I've always stayed in an academic center. I love research, and that's a big component of my practice in my career. However, I have done this new career setup twice in Canada. And then when I was recruited to the US, I did that new practice all over again. So I do feel I have learned many things and also made new mistakes that hopefully you folks don't have to make. And then unfortunately, I seem to have a permanent registration to the University of Hard Knocks. And I still make mistakes, and I'm sure I still will. So given my biases, I actually really wanted to make this talk very comprehensive to kind of hit on the generalized facts that everybody could apply to, irrespective if they're going to do private, if they were going to do academics. And so these are the folks that have actually inadvertently, probably unknowingly helped me with this talk. And as well, because I'm a researcher, I also included research in PubMed, which is also very rife in terms of understanding how to really accelerate your career or accelerate leadership within your career. So these are the agendas, and I've kind of broken it up into 4 main areas. So first, the administrative tasks of your early career, the clinical productivity for success, research education, as well as personal success. So to start, the administrative tasks. We all universally hate paperwork, but sadly, this is important. So one of the things I think particularly during your fellowship, you want to do is you really want to make sure you do the paperwork. Do not bury your head in the sand. The earlier you get on this, the better, because this process is very time consuming. So your medical license, your hospital privileges, changing your address for DEA, all these little things are important. It helps you get registered for insurance networks, as well as it eventually penultimately helps you get paid. If you don't have your medical license, you cannot work. So these are important factors. So the earlier you get on top of this, the better. The next is EMR. So every EMR system is a little bit different. Even if you have the same EMR, they're set up a little bit different with every institution. And not everybody ends up staying at the same institution they trained at. So one of the things is, I think very early on in your career, you're not going to be as busy as someone who has an extremely mature practice. So you want to leverage the quieter times that you have. And so what that means is that you want to take time to make clinical pathways and templates. There's going to be something within your career that you generally are doing. So for things that you are doing, you want to have pathways that are very, very standardized, and you can set that up very early in your practice when things are quieter. You also want to work on dot phrases to make things easier for you. So when you're really, really busy, you will have already set that up early in your career. Next is data collection. So I think data collection, standardizing it very early and spending time early in your career to figure that out is very helpful for you. So you always have certain data points collected. And if you want to use it for research, then you would have had that from the beginning of your career. Because when you start your career, clinical practice is very confusing, very busy. There's a lot of new things you have to learn. So if you want to do a retrospective review, it's helpful if you've already collected that prospectively. Next is billing and coding, and I am terrible at this, but it is something that you really should be mindful of. And there's certainly a lot of courses for billing and coding course, or even asking when you're a senior resident or during your fellowship, like how your attendings are billing is very helpful, because this is a completely different language. As a trainee, you don't typically talk about this or do this. And I think, as mentioned by Nick, the billing, the ancillary, the buy-ins, all these terms and understanding that is very important. And if you're ever going to go to a position, you want to actually understand the practice finance differences, because I think you want to make a conscious decision. Just like we get informed consent, you also want to be very informed about how you're getting paid. Next is clinical productivity. So I think one of the things is building a practice. All of us have been through our training, and we really want to get very, very busy when we start in the things that we want. And I think one of the biggest things to building a practice, and I have found that both in Canada as well as in the US, you want to really say yes to everything. And the reason why is because you want to build a network. You've often gotten in a position where you're not in the neighborhood. People don't know that now you've opened your practice. So you say yes to everything, and you're not going to get like the fancy or fun things right away, but that builds a rapport so that eventually you will build to get the cases you want. So I think that's very important. I think that's a key component to success. Next is networking with your referral sources. I think it's very important. And I think doing educational events, grand rounds is helpful so that people in your community know that you're actually in practice. And mainly, what do you want? Hand surgery is very, very broad. Your training will be very broad within your fellowship as well. So what are you most passionate about? And do educational events. Like for us, start when I came to the US, like I would do talks for the hand therapists. And it's very helpful for them to know you and what you like to do. Next is to really slow down. You're trying to build your practice. You want to take time to actually examine patients. I think patient experience is very important. And it's actually good for you, because now you have nobody like leaning over your shoulders to kind of review your work. It's you mainly. So you want to take your time to examine it. And I think patients appreciate that. And word of mouth is very important. Another thing is to overestimate your OR time. When you're a fellow and you're churning and burning through cases, it's a little bit different when now you're where the buck stops. When it's just you, it's your name on the chart. You really want to overestimate. Maybe you think it'll take a little bit, like you'll take 1 hour, maybe add a little bit more so that the OR staff also gets comfortable that you actually can accurately assess when you can actually finish your cases. Next is to leverage your colleagues. I still to this day am in a group chat with my co-fellows to ask questions. And also, like where I currently practice and where I previously practiced, I would always ask my partners. And I think it's very important to not feel shy to ask partners, particularly when you're starting, questions, or just to double check that you're not overthinking something or that you're missing something. Because obviously in your first couple of years of practice, all the things that you never saw in fellowship will roll into your clinic, I have found. So next is for those who are really interested in academics. So research and education organization. So I think the importance here is your mentors. Your mentors are very good about helping you guide not only your research program, or helping you achieve your goals. So I think during your residency as well as fellowship, finding mentors that you trust and then get along with, and then also can understand and help you achieve the goals that you have is very important. So that's something I actually would start working on now. Next is to create a niche. You can do all of hand surgery if you wish, but for research program, starting off with a niche area that you have a particular passion with and starting a research program in that is very helpful to help guide you and to create traction so that you can get grants and as well as publications, people know you, speaking engagements, all of that. So I think starting it by creating a niche is very important. Next is you want to automate and systemize your research. Again, as mentioned previously about collecting data points as you go prospectively, really making it so every time it's not a new process, but that there's certain things that you always ask your trainees to write a paper in a certain sequence. Like these types of things I think are very helpful for everybody around you. And next, you actually want to protect your time. Research is difficult to do when you have a full clinical practice. And if you don't protect some time to actually do it, you'll just end up finding it more of a stressor than actually executing. So I have actually found protecting time. So I have 1 day a week of research where I like to kind of focus on doing my research, expanding my research, and also reading about what else is going on in my particular field of interest. Next is personal success. Your non-work time, success is not a straight line by any measures. And so what you want to do is for your non-work time, it is important for you to set boundaries as well as maintain consistency. Consistency, I think, is very helpful to your significant others, your family, as well as your staff at work, so that they know that certain things are non-work time where you're spending personal time away dealing with that very important component of your life. So these are my final kind of thoughts. First of all, is to trust yourself. You know what your passion is, and everybody has different goals and aspirations. You should never, ever be comparing your career trajectory with anyone else, because everybody's path is different. So you have to trust that what you want and make the decisions that are right for you. Next, as Rob as well as Nick has mentioned, the importance of choosing your partners wisely, I cannot overemphasize, as was mentioned previously. I think of all the things you say, your partners will dictate your work happiness, your practice pattern, as well as how you are able to continue to learn and thrive and grow your career. I've been very fortunate at Emory to have leadership. So Michael Gottschalk is a wonderful leader. He really leads with us, and he's really leads by example. So having a leadership that is also very understanding of what your goals and very able to work hard with you is also very important, something that you should consider. Next, and I think Nick mentioned as well, you really want to wait for the good people. So that means including new partners into your group, as well as potentially any ancillary staff you have, PA, ATCs, secretaries, MAs. Really, people who are good are worth the wait. So even though you may be suffering, you never want to choose someone just because you're desperate, because that will make everything much, much harder for you, and it will be very hard to undo that. Thank you very much.
That was awesome. I have just been noticing the theme of mentorship, and how important it is to lean on your mentors, both, having them introduce you to colleagues at meetings and asking their thoughts about, what kind of job, red flags to be looking for. And then your mentors can also turn into your partners, as it sounds like it was for Nick. And growing that base of new partners is really important. These are sort of intangibles in a way, but I really like how that folds into the later years. So thank you so much for that, Nina. Cal, do you want to load up your slides? Dr. Shah is going to talk to us about personal finance, which I think is going to take us home. But again, please put comments or questions in the chat box. And certainly if anybody wants to raise their hand or ask questions in the open forum at the end, they're more than welcome to. But I think this is going to be a great transition for the end of the talk. So take it away. Thanks, Cal.
All right, awesome. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, you sound awesome.
Thanks. All right, well, thanks for everyone being here till the end. And my charge is to talk about some personal finance suggestions. So imagine you're in a world where you found the perfect job thanks to Rob and Nick and Nina's help, and now you're making some money. So what do you do with that money? So why is learning about this important? In residency and fellowship, it helped you become a clinical expert, but you got almost no training in business or investments or negotiating. Yet you're your family's or your personal CFO. So you got to learn the basics. It's not rocket science. Think of it like a part-time job that will pay you way more than your clinical practice. And it's important to learn about this stuff because you can't win that financial game if you don't know the rules and how it works. So the agenda, I wanted to kind of go over hitting some of the high yield topics, investing or savings, investing, and insurance. So starting off with savings. So how much or how much to save? The usual recommendation is about 20% of gross income, but there's no limit. Save as much as you can. This idea that often is floated around when you're first starting off is to live like a resident to maximize the saving, because you have a little bit of a slower start, which we'll discuss in a second. But before anything, you got to have zero credit card debt, because that's a 20 to 25% interest you're paying. So it's working against you. So you got to get rid of that. And start thinking about an emergency fund, which is about 3 to 6 months of operating expenses. God forbid you get injured or you have a disability and you need to take some time off, so you need money to live. And what if you change jobs or switch jobs or let go for some odd reason? You need some money to figure out what you're going to do next. So having an emergency fund is important. There's a rule that's often talked about, the 50-30-20 rule, where 50% of the income you should budget for living expenses like your house rent or mortgage, your car, food, just the day-to-day stuff. 30% is discretionary, which is, going out, hanging out with your friends, vacations, hobbies, credit card expenses, and paying them off. And then 20% is the savings, your emergency fund, your savings account, your retirement accounts, which we'll talk about, in the brokerage account or a taxable account. And, if that 50-30-20 seems impossible, consider the fact that it might not be an earning problem, but rather a spending problem. Keeping in mind that a family of four in the US has a median income of $80,000. And as a hand surgeon, you're probably going to be making a little bit more than that. So the first topic, the second topic I want to talk about is investing, and we'll talk about the why should you invest, where, and how. So why? So there's this idea of compound interest, and that's really why. So imagine, walk through this little diagram with me. So imagine you have someone who's starting at 25, and they start investing about $1,000 a year for the first 10 years after 25. So they've put in about $10,000 of investments, and a modest growth is 8%. It grows and grows and grows, and it compounds, where the 8% that grew the first year, now you make money on that 8%. I mean, it just keeps compounding. That person will end up, by the time they're 65, that $10,000 investment ends up at $160,000 roughly. The same person, instead, they start at 35, which often, as a hand surgeon, you're starting in your 30s when you're investing. If that same person put in $1,000 a year for 30 years, that's a $30,000 investment. And with the same 8% interest and compounding, they're only going to make it to about 120. So starting early is important because of the power of compound interest. Now, where are you going to invest this money? And so there are a variety of different accounts. There's tax advantaged accounts and your regular taxable account. The tax advantage accounts are a higher bang for your buck, and we'll explain why. So first set are your self-directed retirement accounts. These are ones where you have about a $7,000 max a year. One of them is called the Roth IRA. The money that goes into this account is post-tax, so you've already paid tax on it. The beauty of this account is that everything in it grows tax-free. So when you buy and sell investments, you don't have to pay taxes on any profit you made. And because the money you put in there is already taxed, when it comes out, you don't pay tax on it. So it's tax-free growth and tax-free withdrawal. The Roth IRA does have some income limits, and most hand surgeons won't meet the criteria to invest in a Roth IRA account, but there's a backdoor Roth IRA, which I'll explain in just a second. The other type of retirement account that you have access to is a traditional IRA. You can put money in this pre or post-tax, so you can put money in it before you pay tax on it or post-tax. It grows tax-free, and when you take it out, it can be taxed depending on if the money you put in was pre or post-tax. Now, the backdoor Roth IRA is where you put money in a traditional IRA, you make it a post-tax investment, and then the day it hits the traditional IRA account, the next day you convert it to a Roth IRA. The benefit of a Roth IRA is that there are some benefits when it comes to inheritance. So when it gets passed off, some advantages to a Roth IRA than a traditional IRA. And also there's some advantages when you take it out when you're 59 and a half or meet the retirement age in the US. There are also some workplace retirement accounts. These are your 401ks, your 403bs, the 457bs. Depending on the place you work, you will have access to one of those accounts. The employee, as in you, what you can put in is about $23,000 a year, and your employer can put up to $45,000 a year for a total of 68, and that's as of this year. Every year it goes up slightly. The money that goes in a retirement account it can be pre or post-tax. It grows tax-free. All of these retirement accounts, because you can't touch it, you can't withdraw from it without a penalty until you retire, they let the money grow tax-free, so there's an advantage there. And depending on if the money went in there pre or post-tax, it can either come out tax-free or you get taxed when it comes out. A lot of employers will match or contribute on your behalf on the employer side of the account. Now that's free money. You don't want to leave any of that on the table, and we'll talk about that in a second. Some other accounts that you might have access to, depending on your arrangement with the employer, is a self-employed IRA or a SORA 401k if you're a contractor and get your income on a 1099 basis as opposed to a W-2 income. And then finally, a brokerage account is a taxable account. So once you max out all your retirement accounts, then you have access to a brokerage account where you just put money in, and that money is post-tax. You've already paid taxes on it, and you invest it. And the only time you pay tax on it is when you sell that investment, and whatever profit you've made, you pay tax on the profit. Now, a brokerage account is a really good place for an emergency fund because you can take money in and out of your brokerage account at any time. There's no penalty for that, like you would with a retirement account. So your money can sit there. And unlike a regular checking account or savings account where you're getting 0.05% or something ridiculous like that, we're making pennies every year on the emergency fund that you're supposed to have, you can put money in a federal or a municipal, especially if you're in the states of California and New York, money market fund. Now, the beauty of these money market funds is a federal money market fund, say you're in a state that's not California or New York, if whatever the money grows to, whatever profit you make, you don't pay federal taxes on it. And if you're in California, New York, and if you put in a municipal money market fund for that state, then it's state and federal tax-free. The amount you can make depends on the interest that's going on in the market at the time. So right now, interest is really high. So your money market funds are giving you really good returns. So my emergency fund sits in a money market fund because it grows tax-free. And whenever I want to take it out, I don't have to pay federal or state taxes on it. Now, say you're in an environment like we were a few years ago when the interest rates were really low, the money market fund's also going to give you not as much. So you might want to look into a high yield savings account. So you kind of have to look at the time where the interest is higher, a high yield savings account or a money market fund. Keep in mind, a high yield savings account, you will pay tax on it. So keep that in mind as you're trying to decide where to put the money in. But that's a good place for your emergency fund. Now, once you figure out the accounts you want to put your money in, you have to figure out what you want to invest in. An individual stock is what everyone talks about. Oh, I invested in Tesla when it was $1 a share. Now it's 1 million a share or something ridiculous. So companies like Tesla and Apple are out there, and they're kind of the shining examples of how you can make a ton of money in the stock market. But I've put up some symbols of companies like Enron and Sears, which don't exist anymore. So stocks are high rewards, but they're also high risk. I don't recommend it because if, 10, 15 years ago when Enron and Sears were still available, you could have put a little bit of money in it, grew really high, but then the companies went bankrupt. I'm not saying that Tesla or Apple will, but that is a possibility. So instead of putting money in individual stocks, you want to diversify it. There are things called mutual funds and ETFs that help you with the diversification. So a mutual fund is essentially a basket of stock. So instead of investing in one company and have your fate tied to that company's fate, you buy a mutual fund where the administrators of the mutual fund have invested in thousands and thousands of companies. So the mutual fund tracks the average of that entire portfolio of companies. So you're diversified. You're not married to one company by itself. There are a lot of mutual funds out there. You can slice and dice the market in different ways. You can look at mutual funds that represent the healthcare sector or the energy sector or the IT section. But my advice is to look at these 4 mutual funds or ETFs that I've listed. There's one that follows the entire US stock market. There's one that follows the international stock market minus the United States to get exposure to other markets. There are real estate mutual funds, and then there are bonds. Asset allocation is something that tells you what percent of your portfolio you're going to invest in the US stock market or the international or the real estate or bonds. And that varies person to person, your risk profile, and also where you are in life. Are you early in your investment career where you can take a lot of risk on? You have 30, 40 years to invest because a higher risk usually means higher rewards. Or are you towards the tail end of your investment career, you're nearing retirement, where you want to keep things low risk and a low reward? So that asset allocation depends on your personal preference. Here's my allocation. I'm early in my career and I have about 30, 40 years of investment time left. So my personal portfolio is such that I have 65% of my portfolio in a total US stock market mutual fund, 25% in an international mutual fund. Of the 25, I've broken it down into 15 in a total international where it looks at the entire international market minus the US. And because I'm Indian and I think India is one of the fastest growing economies in the country, I wanted some exposure to that. I'm a little biased. So I have 10% in a mutual fund that mimics the Indian stock market, 10% in a real estate fund, and 0 in bonds. But as I get a little older, I'll probably start increasing more of my portfolio and put it in bonds. And that kind of brings us to this idea of a waterfall or a financial order of operations. So, step 0, which is not shown here, is an emergency fund. Make sure you have an emergency fund. But once you have the emergency fund put away, what are you going to put your money in? The first one you want to put it in is the 401k or 403b or 457, whatever your employer offers, and take advantage of the free money. So whatever free money they offer, the match or the contribution, whatever the requirement is to get that, because that's just money on the table that you're not taking advantage of if you let it go. Then you want to pay down any kind of high interest debt, credit card debt and things like that. But you're not going to have that because you listen to the stock and you're not going to start your career with any kind of credit card debt. So we can skip that. Investing in an HSA, if that's available to you, is something you might do. We didn't talk about it, so I'm going to skip over that. And then the next step is to putting it in a retirement account, your backdoor Roth IRA, because they are tax advantaged, because the money will grow in there tax free. When you buy and sell, you don't owe any taxes. And you can take it out on the tail end, depending on how you invested it, without paying taxes or paying taxes that are much lower rate than it would be in your, when you're at the height of your career, making the most money you're going to make. Because in retirement, you're arguably going to make, your income's going to be lower, so your tax bracket's going to be lower. So the tax rate when you take the money out is going to be at a lower tax rate. And then whatever's left over, you want to put in a regular brokerage account and invest using the same investment philosophies we talked about earlier. Now that you figured out how to do investment, you also want to think about insurance. You have your basic insurance, homeowners and your renters and your auto to protect your home and your vehicles and yourself. But you also want to think about disability insurance. You have to protect the biggest asset you have, which are your hands. You can have a whole talk just on disability insurance because there's so much nuance to it. But the biggest takeaway is you want a disability insurance policy that's own occupation, guaranteed renewable. So what does that mean? That means it's tied to your occupation as a hand surgeon. There are a lot of disability insurance policies out there. They're extremely cheap that say, hey, if you get disabled, it will pay you. But even if you can work as a janitor or do part-time work, that does not count. They say you're employed, we won't pay you. So that's not a good policy. You want a policy that pays you, even if you can say work as a radiologist or an urgent care doctor, because you can't operate anymore because of some disability. The policy will still pay because you're not working as a hand surgeon. So you want to own occupation policy, and you want something that's guaranteed renewable. They can't just pull the plug and say, yeah, no, you're too risky for us to insure, so we're going to take away your policy. Companies can do that unless it's a guaranteed renewable policy. So look for that when you look at disability insurance. And the best policies are usually sold through independent insurance agents. Some agents who only work for certain companies are all going to try and sell you policies that might not be in your best interest. The next thing you want to think about is life insurance. And this is only applicable if you have a family, if you have a spouse or kids, and you want to help protect them in case you pass. So a term life insurance policy is relatively inexpensive and essentially says, hey, if you pass, we will pay you this amount as long as the policy is active. A lot of insurance agents will try to sell you a whole life insurance policy. There's a lot of reason why that's not a good idea, but essentially a whole life insurance policy is one where they mix in investment and life insurance. Usually these types of policies are designed to be sold, not bought. And if it means anything, the person selling you will, whatever your payments are for a year, they make about 80 or 90% of the annual payment that you would make as commission. So it kind of is a red flag in and of itself, but these are generally not policies you want to buy. It's better to buy life insurance, like a term life insurance policy, and invest the rest by yourself. And then finally, you want to think about an umbrella insurance policy. Like the name suggests, it's an umbrella. So it protects against all liabilities that the other policies don't cover. So for example, you get in a car accident and unfortunately there's a fatality and you're being sued and you're on the hook for, say, a $2 million judgment. And the auto insurance policy you have covers for $1 million of it, so the umbrella would pick up the rest. Or if you get sued and the judgment against that lawsuit, which didn't go in your favor, was $2 or $3 million, but your malpractice insurance policy for your practice only covers 1 or 2, the umbrella would pick up the rest. And then finally, the malpractice insurance that's typically provided by your practice, and you typically don't have to go out and buy it yourself. So that's kind of a quick and dirty talk on the 3 big things: savings, investment, and insurance. Some of the resources that I've learned to like over the past few years have been the White Coat Investor. It's a blog run by Jim Dolly, who's an ER physician in Utah. Started off as a blog, but now he has a couple of books that are excellent. He has a podcast that I routinely listen to, and he's on social media on Reddit. There is a pretty active forum, and also on Facebook. These books are excellent books for someone who's beginning and just learning the basics. And that's all you really need, is the basics to learn how to do this on your own. It's really not that challenging. And while I'm not an expert, feel free to email me or reach out to me if you have any questions. Thank you.
Wonderful. So I think we're just about out of time here. I did not see any additional questions pop up in the chat box, so I'm going to conclude the evening. Thank you very much to our speakers and to my wonderful partner, Dr. Dendaluri, for inviting me to be part of this, and hand it back over to Dr. Jain. And thank you to the AHS for hosting this. This is a wonderful resource for the members. And Dr. Jain, thank you.
No, thanks, Sonia. Wonderful job moderating. Thanks, Sai, for organizing this. To my partner in crime, Warren Hammert, for some behind-the-scenes work. And a big thank you to all of our speakers. I mean, these talks were fantastic. Really told us what we need to know, as residents and fellows on getting a job and practicing hand surgery. I mean, to be honest, this is relevant even to us practicing hand surgeons. So finally, I'd like to thank you, the audience, for spending your evening with us, and invite you to join us for our upcoming webinars, which can be located at the AHS website at handsurgery.org. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.